Let's talk a bit about finding patterns in data using correlations. What we have here is a data set that has the marks of individual students from across a variety of schools in and around Bangalore. We have their total marks and we have their marks in Hindi, science, mathematics, social science, Kannada, English as a second language. And the question that we'd like to answer is, are the marks in one subject correlated with another? If people score more in science, do they score more in mathematics? If they score more in social science, do they score more in Kannada? Are there certain pairs of subjects that go well together? Are there certain subjects that are completely unrelated? That's the kind of analysis that we'd like to do. So what we're going to do is use the data analysis tool pack that's built in into Excel. You may need to enable it, but we won't go into how to enable it just right now. Once you've enabled it, you can select the data analysis tool pack and pick one of these analysis methods. The analysis method we're going to pick now is correlation. What this does is allows you to pick a range of columns. So the column range that I'm going to pick is Hindi to English, and these are grouped by columns. So I'm telling that I've picked columns that contain data, not rows that contain data. I mentioned that there are labels in the first row because the first row has the names of the subjects. If I didn't do that, it would throw an error. And I'm going to say keep the output in a new worksheet within the same workbook. Let's give it a name, correlation. Click OK. Now, it's created this. What each cell represents is the correlation between a pair of subjects. So this number 0.734 is the correlation between Hindi as a third language and science. This number 0.775 is the correlation between social science and science. One problem with the way numbers are usually depicted in Excel is that it's a bit too much information. I'm not really concerned about the correlation between science and Hindi being 0.734144. Realistically, I'm interested in at most 2 decimals. Invariably, more decimals leads to more confusion. So one way of doing that is to just reduce the number of decimals. Or in this particular case, we can also choose to represent it as a percentage because the numbers will always be between 0 and 1. Now, you'll also notice that there's a 100% correlation between the subject and itself, which is of course true, and that's not giving us any new information. So let's just knock that off, and now we have the correlation between every pair. The reason the top right diagonal is empty is because the correlation between science and Hindi the third is the same as the correlation between Hindi the third and science. So these numbers are exactly the same. Now let's look at which are the larger ones and smaller ones. It usually helps to have conditional formatting turned on to be able to quickly see what the patterns are. So if I do that, 81% correlation between mathematics and science, that seems to stand out as being the highest, and science is generally positively correlated with most subjects. The 62% correlation between English and Kannada seems to be among the lowest, is in fact the lowest, and that tells me that people who know Kannada don't necessarily know English too well and vice versa. The medium of instruction of schools often has a fairly strong part to play in this. Social science and Kannada are not too well correlated either. In fact, Kannada doesn't seem to be well correlated with most subjects, which means that the higher you score in Kannada, the less likely it is that you will score higher in other subjects. Now, this particular pattern is among the subjects themselves. What if I wanted to see which subjects correlate to the total marks, meaning what subjects are contributing the most to the total marks? We can redo the same analysis and include the total marks column in that. So I'm going to go to the data tab, click on data analysis, correlation, and instead of columns D to I, I'm going to pick columns C to I, which will make sure that I include the total marks column. And the rest of the details are the same. I'm going to put this however in sheet correlation 2, and this contains same data set but with total marks in addition to the rest. Let's do the same thing that we did before. We'll remove the diagonals. We'll convert these to percentages so that it becomes easier to read, and we'll apply conditional formatting. You'll notice that the correlation between total marks and all of the subjects is relatively high compared to the individual ones. Now that's usually because the higher one scores in any one subject, the higher one scores in any in the total marks. So there's a fairly strong positive correlation. If however we just took the correlations among the subjects alone and did a conditional formatting, sorry, I should be, let's do that again. Conditional formatting on the color scales. The primary correlation appears to be with science, and the least correlation appears to be with Kannada. That's a way of looking at correlation patterns across any data set. These do not have to be marks. They could be sales across different branches. You can try and see whether sales of one branch increases the sales of another. They could be product sales. Are there certain products that tend to sell well together? They could be weather patterns. Does it mean that if it rains in one region, is it likely to rain in another region? Any of these patterns can be used to identify correlations, and once you have the correlation pattern, you can get a sense of what it is that influences another variable and get insights out of that.